My question is for everybody. First of all, you guys are great, great job, great professionals. But I'd like to know from agencies and from productions company, what do you expect from communications for the next 10 years? We are talking about innovation, and I'm trying to improve my own agency here in Brazil. And the question I do to myself every day is, how can I be alive for the next 10 years? And talking about innovation, because I think every one of us nowadays, we have our own communication vehicles. If I don't like something, I post a blog, I send a tweet, I make a video, and if a little bit of luck, I can do success, and I can how can I say it? Atingir. I can reach my audience. So how can communication will be in next 10 years if everyone can be an advertiser? Something like this.
Who wants that one? Ivan?
I think one part of it, and actually goes back to two questions back as well, is that it's increasingly hard to put a fine line on what is communication and what is marketing and what is advertising and what is redesigning your product and restructuring your entire company. I mean, the problem with continuing to see it as just communication or just marketing is, again, I mean, I think Alex said it perfectly, that you can only make something look like something it's not so much, and that's instinctively what people distrust about advertising and marketing communications. The trick becomes, over the past few years, we've seen at Big Spaceship, and I think probably several other agencies and production companies have as well, that the real work that we usually need to do for clients isn't in telling them how to explain what they already have differently, but in rethinking what they have in the first place and restructuring their company if they have to, starting to change their product, starting to know how to actually, I mean, communications is almost more important in incoming direction than in outgoing. It's more important to be able to hear what everyone else is communicating to your brand than for your brand to be able to figure out a better way to communicate what it wants to say to everybody else. And that's, in a lot of ways, the hardest thing. It's a stumbling point right now, because when a lot of brands engage with agencies, they're not interested in anyone saying, well, you have to do your job differently also. They're looking for someone who can come in and give them a solution, a TV package, a cross-platform package, whatever, that makes what they're already doing the perfect answer. And it really, I think the next 10 years are going to be a breakdown in thinking that advertising or marketing is something that can happen without fundamentally restructuring or rethinking what's being marketed in the first place.
I think there's a really fuzzy line between advertising and business success. I think that probably about dating back to about the 1930s or 1940s, particularly in the States, we built up a wonderful set of assumptions about the successfulness of advertising as a way to generate success within business. I think it is successful, but I think that we built industries out of necessity, and I think that some of those necessities were building up assumptions about direct lines between how pretty your campaign is, how many impressions it gets, and how many units you move. I think that one of the greatest things we've seen, and I say greatest in the most awe-inspired sense, I think one of the greatest things we've seen in the last 15 years is a fundamental destabilization of those assumptions. So, what is the future for communication? I'm not really quite sure. I think advertising might have to look a little more like art. I think business might have to look a little bit more like culture. But I think in the next 10 years, we see a further destabilization of many of those assumptions, which isn't to suggest that we won't then find out other ways, discover that some things were true and some things were incredibly false. But, I think we're probably on some sort of a pathway that pulls the blanket back a little bit. And then, we have to adjust in many of the ways that Ivan is suggesting. You can put together beautiful packages, sure. But, is that necessarily going to provide the outcomes that perhaps were once promised or were once believed? I think, one of the things that we've learned the last 5 years especially are that, well, maybe it was never providing those outcomes anyway. Which I think brings us, back to an earlier discussion about how much of this really needs to be creative and cultural practice, and more about, I don't know, doing something that is of significance rather than necessarily doing something because it is motivated by a desire to do business. You know? And I'm not anti-business, by the way. I like money and that sort of
We create brand communication, or whatever you want to call it. We tend to focus on something unique and something relevant. The delivery of that message was always a little bit neglected, in my view. And I think, Ivan, you said it right. What will happen is you'll be killed if you don't deliver. So I think it's $1 million question. It's a very difficult question to answer. But what will happen, I think, in the future, more and more, is that you have to somehow tell the truth. And because at least deliver something. And if you don't deliver, you're screwed. Yeah, well, advertising.
Can I just take? Can I have a quick show of hands? Who wants to? Because it's 6 o'clock. We were going to stop. Shall we give it another 5 minutes? Show of hands. Who wants to carry on for another 5 minutes? Okay. Anybody who wants to go, then help yourselves. I'll take on the mic.
Because how can I say? Advertising in the last 10, 20 years are talking to million people in a one way. Now we are going to one-to-one marketing, a one-to-one business, and a mobile business that communication can go with you wherever you are. So it's if you don't say the truth, if you don't, seems to be really true, seems to be touching, it seems to be real. It don't mean it's going to be advertising in the next 10 years.
You can't compare advertising people with second-hand car salesmen. No, they will tell everything to get rid of that car of their lot, and that's actually how it was. I don't think most of us here are definitely not like that. But you need to really kind of, as I stick to the promises you make. And the advertising industry has had virus till very recently, and thank God technology came along and gave consumers a voice, which normally were people who normally were not heard. I think that's a very good development, because now all of a sudden we go like, fuck, we need to do something with this, and we need to come up with ideas, as I said, not only unique ideas and not only relevant ideas, but as I said, the delivery of the message is the most important thing, which then puts the responsibility straight back at clients.
Yeah.
Because it's not that we don't want to. It's very rare to find a client like the Hans Brinker, who's willing to take that risk and actually kind of cultivates that image. But it's very difficult to find clients who want to not only focus on their good points, but also show their vulnerable side. So that change starts not only with us, it starts with clients as well.
I think there's also, there's a cultural shift that takes place and needs to continue taking place, because a lot of people think of, I don't think it's that people don't trust brands. I think it's that people don't trust advertisers who advertise for brands, because advertising for a lot of people is the science of making them want things they don't want or need. That's, if you ask people what advertising does, they would say that. And I think the truth falls between what the two of you said, which is that's not going to work anymore, not once people can talk back and talk to each other about what you're saying and don't just have to listen in their own homes separately. So one way or another, it's what you said, we have to deliver. And delivering doesn't necessarily, it really can't mean just changing the message more and more until we're telling people that we have something mediocre and that they should want it anyway. It has to be the product that changes to match the advertising more than the advertising that changes to match the product, I think.